Hello and welcome to the very first ever episode of, and maybe the last ever episode of, DM and DMer. My name is Nathan Peterson. I am the Dungeon Master for Dice and Desire, which you probably know because this may very well be released on the Dice and Desire thread. So if you don't know who I am, be a bit weird that you're listening to this show, but there you go. For a little while, I've been thinking and toying around doing an interview-style TV show. Brilliant. Great start. This is why I shouldn't be allowed to do podcasts. An interview-style podcast where I talk to other people, various other people from other shows and walks of life about their experiences with Dungeons and Dragons. Or indeed other TTRPG systems, because I'm not going to just limit it to the one and only D&D. It's no surprise or no secret that this game has taken a hold of my life, and therefore I like talking about it. I like getting involved in conversations about it, and it's pretty much all I do in my spare time nowadays. So yeah, that's the very brief outline of what this show was intended to be, and I will be getting some guests on in the near future. But to start with, my very first guest is a man that, again, hopefully you are very familiar with. He plays your bard, Dweezil Vansifear. His name is Stuart Bullock. Welcome to the show, Stuart Bullock.
Thank you, Nathan. It's an absolute pleasure to be your first guest on your new podcast endeavour.
Yeah, my podcast, this one. Albeit it's going to be, thrown out on the same as the one we do together. This is mine.
Yeah.
You can't
the
have
Nathan Peterson Show. The Nathan Peterson Television Spectacular.
Yeah. Me. I hate, the focus and spotlight being on me. Also me. Let me do a podcast where I'm the focus and spotlight. How are you?
Very well as we speak. It's a gloomy Friday in Manchester, but I am off work, so that's nice. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well. It's also gloomy here. I'm not in Manchester. That part is very much different, but it is gloomy here. It's a Friday. It's also a Friday for me.
No time difference there.
No.
So.
No, there isn't.
Always the same.
We learnt that. On another podcast that we recorded earlier this week, that the time is the same in the north and the south. D&D, that's a thing that connects us, as well as many other things you've been playing for a while. We'll get into the D&D and the TTRPG and all that sort of malarkey in a little bit. But is it fair to say you're a fan of the game?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I've been massively enjoying our experiences and our adventure through D&D and other Pathfinder we've been playing as well. Been loving it. Really looking forward to all our sessions. We're now about as far away from the last session as it's possible to be, because we're due to play again on Monday. So I'm getting that itch. Loving it. Absolutely loving it. It's like you said, it's kind of taken over my life in the last 12 months.
It's very weird for something that I've looked at from afar for quite a while, a few years. It's not like it's been there on my radar for like my entire life or anything like that. But for 5 years, for argument's sake, I don't think even I anticipated quite how much I was going to fall in love with it. And like I said in my introduction, that's why I wanted to do this show, because not only do I enjoy playing it, it's great every 2 weeks playing with you guys, as well as the other games that we run, as you mentioned. Just all I do really is to talk about it or think about it. It's just so much at the forefront of my mind. It's bizarre. I've sort of left my wife and child. I'm now living in a D&D hut where it's just me surrounded by dice. No, that's a joke. But no, it's very much the forefront of everything I do nowadays. But aside from D&D, you're also a man, I think it's fair to say. You're a human man who has other things in life. So let's talk about Stuart and who you are prior to Dice and Desire. You're a music man.
I am a music man. I come from far away.
Very true. How did you get into music? What is that something? Oh, listen, I'm not going to boil you down to one thing, which is music, but I think it's fair to say that's a big passion in your life.
Yeah.
How did you get into music? What is that something that's been with you since you was a kid, or is it just sort of something you sort of stumbled into?
No, massively since I was a kid. So, music's always been my dad. My dad loves music. He's not a musician, but he's always loved music. He always had a big record collection. He was one of the first people we knew who got a CD player. So there was always music around the house. I had an older brother, half brother, who was 12 years older than me, and he lived with us for a short period of time when I was very young, and that's some of my earliest memories of music. He listened to a lot of heavy rock music, a lot of AC/DC at that time. I remember him showing me Kiss, and it just being very exciting to me, and it being something that I associated with my big brother, who to me was some kind of god. You know, he was 12 years older than me, so at the age of kind of 3 or 4, he was 15, 16-year-old, and he would play me this music. And from that moment, really, I've always loved it. I was a massive Michael Jackson fan from being about 6. Obsessed with the Thriller album. Had that on a cassette, which I would listen to constantly. So it was always just listening to music on headphones was always a massive part of my life. Singing was something that came natural to me. I used to go to church quite a lot. I was part of the boys' brigade, and we used to get taken to church and what have you on a Sunday. And I always remember singing in church. And I remember, I've got vivid memories of like old women at the church coming up to me after the service, going, "Oh, you've got a lovely voice," and thinking, "I like that. I like that." So then it, singing in school choirs and what have you, being asked to do solos, performing in school plays, getting lead roles, that kind of thing. So I always enjoyed that validation of people saying that I was good at it, and then I wanted to do it more. I didn't start learning to play instruments until I was about 11. Bought myself a guitar when I was 13 or 14, and I haven't really looked back since, but it's always been there.
The guitar, the gateway instrument into music. I mean, aside from guitar, what else would people start off with? A recorder? Triangle?
I did play recorder when I was little. Triangle.
So guitar was your first. Is that? Would you say that's your main weapon of choice, so to speak? If you had to play only one instrument for the rest of your life.
Yeah, guitar, 100%. But it wasn't my first instrument. I did learn to play recorder when I was at primary school and what have you. But I started having French horn lessons when I was maybe 10 or 11, and that was my main instrument up to. That was what I went to college as my main instrument to do A-level performance, and then halfway through my performance, I switched to taking my singing more seriously. And that's what I then went on to study at university. I went on to study singing at university, but. Guitar's always been what I enjoyed. I followed my music education was a very classical based education, because that was kind of the pathway that was put in front of me. But it was never I've always been more of a pop music guy, and the guitar's always spoken to me a bit more, because from being 12 and seeing Guns N' Roses, that kind of thing, and like I say, back to my brother showing me the AC/DC, it's always been the guy with the guitar doing the crazy things that's been that caught my imagination.
That's amazing. We sort of skimmed over it. Well, I didn't skim over it. You mentioned it. I had no idea, the church thing. Was that just like while you was a kid, or have you? Man, you're certainly not a religious man now, or certainly don't come across as a religious man now. And it's worth actually saying. You mentioned there about singing. I would say actually, not all the time, but there's certainly I've noticed in some of the stuff that I've heard you when you're singing, there's something sort of, I don't know what the word is. Is it choristic? I don't know if that's the right word, but very much choral, I guess. There is something a little bit about that, a little bit like Sunday church style in some of your singing. So that makes sense that would be where your first, or where you would have sort of learned to sing, whatever. So is church a big thing for you, or was it a big thing for you?
I remember, right, I went to a C of E primary school, like I think a lot of us did, a school that was nominally a Church of England primary. And this was in Bradford, of course, because I wasn't born in Manchester. And there was a church next to the school, 500, half a mile away from my house or what have you. And I've got these memories of going there to Sunday school as a kid and not liking it. And I don't know whether that was my mum taking me or whatever. And then I joined the boys' brigade. And if you went to church on Sunday, you got points. And once a month, there was like the boys' brigade special service. And it was kind of expected that you go to that. So I would go to that out of kind of duty. And I suppose this is, up to the age of being like 10 or 11, you kind of just take it with a pinch of salt. If you're brought up around a Christian school and going to church and people tell you these things about Jesus, you go, oh yeah, that's all true. That's all just the fact. And you don't even question it. But I never had any kind of feeling towards it. I never had any deep, kind of love for the religion. And then this is the bit that's going to get you. So we moved to Manchester when I was 11, and round the corner from where I lived, there was a little church, a little evangelical church, and I started just taking myself to it on a Sunday afternoon for the Sunday service. Not with my mum and dad, no one making me go. I was taking myself. I think I had this. I think I was looking for something.
Yeah.
I felt like I would. It's something that I'd had and I was missing. And I went all the time, and I was always kind of trying to force myself to have some kind of faith or some kind of belief. And I don't think I ever really did. I liked the idea of having the faith, having the belief. I had some friends who went to the church. Their father was actually the pastor. And I think what was the final straw in the coffin was that their father had an affair with the treasurer of the church and left their mother. And I was like, he's like the best Jesus man. He's the captain of the Jesus team, and he's done this thing that was fairly abhorrent, he cheated on my mate's mum. It ruined their, really devastated them and devastated their family, and he was meant to be the captain of the Jesus team. So I thought, yeah, it's shit, innit? I won't bother with this anymore. I had another dabbling with the church about 9 years ago when my son was born. My wife really wanted to get him christened, and I said, I'll do that. That's fine. But what I won't do is stand at the front of the church and tell lies. Got too much respect. I'm not going to disrespect someone's religion by standing in a church and lying. I'm too much of a good guy, Nathan Peterson. You know that.
Yeah.
So we went along to this meeting, and the priest was like, I believe you're not a Christian. I was like, yeah, that's true. She went, well, we'll work around that. We can make something work. Thank you for telling me. She said, most people just kind of go along with it and lie, to get the kids christened, to get them into a school or what have you. Thank you. I really respect you. So the way she repaid that kind of respect that I'd shown her was essentially to just force me to do things for the church for the next 3 years. So I once again ended up being a regular churchgoer because I was going to the church playing music and stuff. I was in the band at the church. I played the church organ for Carols by Candlelight one year, Nathan Peterson.
Wow!
She phoned me 2 days before, and it was Christmas, and she phoned me at 10 o'clock at night. She did that on purpose. She knew I'd have had a beer by that point, a few days before Christmas. It's like, Stuart, can you play the organ? Not really. I can barely play the piano. Well, it'd be better than nothing, wouldn't it? I was like, why? What do you want me to do? We haven't got an organist for Carols by Candlelight. So I went down. I spent an entire day in the church basically practicing these 3 carols, working my way around the organ, and played the organ for the Carols by Candlelight service. So that was good. So I have had this weird... I'm sure at some point I'll somehow get dragged back into Christianity again against my will. It does seem to happen quite often.
So a little bit of context for anyone listening who's less familiar with us as friends, perhaps people that haven't listened to us on Fruck Unwrapped and things like that. Known Stuart now. I was trying to work this out the other day. I don't know how long I've known you. So I know, roughly speaking, I sort of met MJ. So we know each other through a mutual friend, MJ, who's also on the Dice and Desire podcast, plays Quinch, the second barbarian. And so I know Stuart through him, and I met MJ in 2014. Because it was about 6 months before, 6 to 9 months before I got married in 2015, so I know that, roughly speaking. So I would have met you sometime after then. Or not physically met, because we obviously met at his wedding, but in terms of online meeting. So yeah, we must have known each other for about 5 years, give or take.
I think I remember congratulating you on your wedding in the comments of a Fruck video. So it must have been around that
Yeah,
time.
about 2015 then. So yeah, I've known Stuart for give or take about 5 years. First time I think I've heard this. Certainly, first time I'm remembering any conversation about his the fact that he's the most religious man I've ever met. Because he's helped the church. I mean, most people I know that are religious, they just go to church. Stuart, on the other hand, is there actively influencing the faith of others. So fair play, mate. Fair play. Yeah, church is a funny one. Same as you. I went to a C of E primary school, and I agree. Like at that, you only really know at that age. You only know the people you go to school with, and maybe some family like cousins or whatever that go to other schools. But I didn't really have that. Any of my close children family actually went to the same school as me. So realistically, my bubble was this school. And same as you, it wasn't a scientific fact, but yeah, Jesus, God, Holy Trinity, all of that sort of stuff. It was the thing. There was nothing outside that very much. I don't think there was a point where the penny dropped, or I didn't have any event like you where you were like, oh, maybe this isn't for me. But I won't lie, like there's definitely been a part of me, maybe not so much now. I think I think the veil's very much dropped. But there was a point where I was definitely not religious, but I sort of enjoyed going to church, not necessarily on a Sunday, but like for a wedding or a christening or something like that. It was something I used to go there, and I was like, there was something about the pomp and ceremony of it all that I sort of quite enjoyed. It was a familiarity to me and my childhood. So I can certainly understand that why you might sort of like want to find that faith, or because it is part of my identity. I was confirmed at the age of like 10 or 11. I'm legally speaking, I can go up and get the old bread and wine, but it's not me now. But it certainly was but I can't deny that was part of my past, for several years. So fair play.
You're right though, like when it's a christening or a wedding or whatever, it is nice to go into church, and it's kind of comforting. It's kind of nostalgic. It's you get dragged to church for special occasions when you were at school, so church had that special occasion feeling around it. So it is, I do still quite enjoy it, and I love going and singing a bit louder than everyone else. That's great fun.
That's because you got the history, mate. You can do both as well. You can play and sing at the same time. You're the Elton John of the of the church. Yeah, I'm not going to get anti-religious by any means, but what I will say is on the point you said there about people lying. I'm not a fan of. So we had the decision to make whether we got my daughter Adelaide christened, and indeed before that where we got married. I'm not a fan particularly of people that use church as a
prop.
Yeah, if you're not religious, don't get married in a church. Don't get them christened. Like, don't go to church for 6 weeks just to be able to have a nicer scenery. Now, okay, if you've got a family who's heavily religious, I'll give you a bit of leeway on that one, because it's you're trying to keep traditions within your family. Okay, that's a little bit different. But if you don't have a religious family or super religious family, I'm not a fan of that. I just think that's a little bit hypocritical that 364 days of the year you don't pay any homage to the religion, and then all of a sudden it suits your needs, and therefore you're suddenly captain of the God's God, as you said. Well, let's move away from religion, and let's talk about something else that requires faith and make-believe. No, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But a little bit of faith. TTRPG, that's why we're here, ultimately. What's your history with role-playing? And we'll keep this one out of the bedroom.
I'm trying to think about this, like I remember when I moved over to Manchester, on the notice board there was a big hand-drawn poster. It was awesome. It had a dragon and like someone fighting it and this, and it said Dungeons and Dragons Club, such and such room, Monday lunchtimes at 12:30 or whatever. And I was like, yes,
sorry,
brilliant.
Can I just stop you there? Is this at the C of E school?
No, this was when I went to high school. When I moved over to Manchester, I went to high school. So this would be in 1989, and being excited by it because in my head that was like, yes, I've always wanted to play, but I don't know why I wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. I've been trying to get to the bottom of where my interest in kind of fantasy came from. Like I had I had a fighting fantasy book. I'd read Choose Your Own Adventure books when I was a kid, and then I'd got a fighting fantasy book. I can't remember which one it was. It wasn't the Warlock of Firetop Mountain. All I remember about it was you had to pick your weapons from an armory, and if you chose the battle axe, you were down a weapon because the battle axe was missing, and that was a clue later on. You see, can't remember which it was though. But I'd always had that interest. Maybe the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, perhaps. I was thinking maybe it was a link to rock music as well, because you get all the fantasy imagery in rock music, but that was it. As soon as I saw that, I was like, right, I want to do it. And I turned up to the club and opened the door, and the teacher who was running it sent me away, shouted at me, sent me away. Which,
Why?
in hindsight,
Do you know
I don't
why?
know. With hindsight, I wonder whether maybe they got a bit of grief, whether they got a bit of disruption, and she thought it was a bit of disruption. I think that perhaps they were part way through a campaign.
Maybe.
And I was too late. I joined the school after October half term. Perhaps I was just too late. But that kind of put me off. It didn't put me off. It stopped me from wanting to go to the school Dungeons and Dragons club. But then I still had this desire to play role playing games.
So what edition would that have been then? I think you said before. Would that have been second edition or advanced or something like that?
So that would have been I want to say Red Box second edition. That would have been. I know that they were playing the Keep on the Borderlands module. I remember that they were playing the Keep on the Borderlands module because when I did finally get to play D&D later on, that teacher gave us the Keep on the Borderlands module, which we didn't play. But when I first started playing, the first edition of D&D that I bought was the big black box, which I think they call it like the easy to learn. It was second edition basic.
Right. So you started playing with that version, and how did that? Was that something that you found yourself? Did you fall straight into it? Did you find it hard to pick up? Did you stick with it for a while? What was your experiences with that?
Looking back on it, we didn't play Dungeons and Dragons. What we did was we used some of the Dungeons and Dragons reference material to allow us to basically do some collaborative storytelling, which is essentially what Dungeons and Dragons is. But I don't, I remember that my character got to a stupidly high level very, very quickly because I think we just decided that would be best, and no one was planning everything. It was completely open world sandbox adventure. We weren't running modules, but there was no real kind of planning involved. It would be we'd make it up as we go along. Nominally, a lad called John was the DM, and he'd just throw things at us, and we'd pretend, we did a lot of shopping. There was a lot of, I think we built a castle at one point, but essentially we were just making stuff up and being silly with it. But it wasn't really following the system, despite the fact that I then went on one of the most beautiful source books and one of the best source books, which I think TSR, as it was then, ever released for D&D, was the Rules Cyclopedia. And I remember saving for the Rules Cyclopedia, and it was it brought in, I want to say, Druid and Mystic as two new classes that could be played. It was a great book. I remember buying a folder of a second edition AD&D monster manual or monster compendium, and that was fantastic. I love reading through the different monsters, and because it was kind of all encompassing for a period of time. Just obsessed with it.
When you say a period of time, like how long are we talking? Like years, weeks, months? I know it's hard to tell from like this side of memory.
I think I was playing maybe for a couple of years. maybe from being 13, 14 to being about 16. Certainly didn't play once I left school. By that point, I'd kind of moved away from D&D and got more into the Games Workshop side of things, which scratched that kind of fantasy itch, but in a more kind of collectible way. You know, it became the hobby of painting everything as well, and got into that. But one of the things that put me off D&D, which was maybe put an end to it, there was a shop, small town outside Manchester called Ashton. There was a shop that sold fantasy stuff. It sold D&D source books. It sold miniatures, paints, all that kind of stuff. Massive foam weapons for LARPing. And I remember going in and looking at something. I can't remember what it was that I was asking for, what it is that I was looking for. But basically, the guy sneering at me for playing D&D and not a D&D. And I was like, I don't really know. Didn't really know that there was an option to play a D&D. But he was like, you play Dungeons and Dragons? No one plays Dungeons and Dragons, mate. Everyone plays Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, I mean, now you just go, oh, you absolute gatekeeping wanker. But at the time, you're like, oh, I feel like I've been embarrassed. Like, as bad as it is, like I've gone into a geeky shop and been made to feel like not enough of a geek. I imagine there's an awful lot of people who've got similar stories of just horrific gatekeeping by socially inept nerds.
It's quite a tough world to break into. So, you know, a lot of people, I think it's fair to say, a lot of people that historically, maybe not so much in the last few years, but historically, D&D is, you know, it's the game of the nerds. It's very much it's got its own culture, and it's attracted certain type of people. And unfortunately, those people have probably not had a great time at school. They've probably, whether that's not even just bullying, but just anything that just makes them a little bit socially awkward, etc., etc. And so maybe they're not quite equipped with dealing with that sort of scenario of just like trying to welcome people in. That sounds like I'm saying all nerds are arseholes. I'm not trying to say that, but there are certainly some people that have probably, you know, not had the best time at school and in their upbringing, and it's maybe made them, like you say, a gatekeeper. Maybe they're a bit protective over what they want and a bit snobbish over liking this one system over another. You know, I came to Dungeons and Dragons knowing Dungeons and Dragons. That's all I knew. I didn't know that there was a 5th edition, and even if I'd heard the words 5th edition, I just assumed it's the same game but with a few added stats. You know, it's like FIFA. It's the same game as 5 years ago, except for I've got different players and slightly better graphics, and you know, it's ultimately I'm still playing the same game. But now, with that hindsight of the last year of playing, I understand, although I don't really understand the differences, I understand that 5e and 3.5e and advanced D&D and all these various systems are quite mechanically different. Yes, ultimately we're still playing the same game of role playing and combat, but actually ultimately it's quite a different game. And that's before you span off into Pathfinder and Call of Cthulhu and all the various other games that are out there. So yeah, it's a shame that you would have had that experience. So coming back to it, so you Warhammer, is it what you said you play?
Yeah, so I started playing Warhammer, as it was then Warhammer Fantasy Battle, which is the kind of high fantasy, you know, elves and orcs and goblins and knights and stuff. And then moved into the Warhammer 40,000, which is the more space orientated, which then led me into my one and only attempt at writing an RPG. And I created my own RPG. I think I've told this before. It was called Future Shock. Yes. And it was essentially a very watered down kind of D&D based system, D20 system, but using Warhammer 40,000 races and classes.
I mean, that's ultimately how
essentially what I'm saying is I invented Starfinder.
Well, we'll get onto Paizo and see if they can send you some royalties. But ultimately, I'd imagine that's where a lot of us start. I mean, I don't think it's exactly this, and I don't know the intricacies of it. But there's a lot of people that say that ultimately Pathfinder is people love D&D 3.5e, and then when they went to fourth edition, they that people were like, we like 3.5, but we think there could be some improvements, and that's ultimately where it spanned from. It's that, but different, and that's obviously how I doubt very many systems that are being. I might be wrong, and I apologise to anybody who is making their own things, but I imagine a lot of the games that are out there, or new systems that are out there, take something existing and develop it. Whether it's just like you said, the creatures and classes and things like that, and base it off of that, and then completely do everything outside. I doubt there's anything that's completely original and doesn't borrow or isn't influenced by something else out there. So that's fair enough. Talk to me about Warhammer though. I don't really know much about it other than the minis and the painting. Like I assume there's no role play. It's all just sort of more tactical fighting.
There are ways in which you can make it more have a more role play element. So there are, for example, with Warhammer 40k, you can do a conquest where you build a team and that team evolves over time. But it's not so much. I imagine there are people that play it with a more kind of role play heavy way. I mean, I've been known to make a gun noise, but.
Write that down for title of the show if we're gonna do that.
I think they have released some Warhammer role playing games as well, but I've never really played them. For me, it was always just that. It just appealed to me. That collecting things has always appealed to me. Stuff and kit has always appealed to me. So buying the minis, collecting them, painting them, getting that White Dwarf magazine, looking at how other people painted them, and actually playing the games back then was always a very, very rare occurrence. I had one mate that played Warhammer. I would try and get other people into playing 40k and what have you, and I managed to convince a couple of mates to buy bits of armies, and we'd play some games, but ultimately, it was very difficult to get a game going. I'd go to the store sometimes and play, and God, there was some gatekeeping there in the 1990s, like serious gatekeeping. And from the store's point of view as well, you had to paint the bases of your minis a certain colour, otherwise you weren't allowed to use them on the tables. Like, I know that Warhammer 40,000 is essentially a satire of a fascist regime, but Games Workshop in the 1990s was kind of playing that out in reality.
To me, if you have to paint them a certain colour, why not just make them that colour? Like like you say, that's gatekeeping. That just seems pathetic. Yeah. I was thinking earlier when you were talking about the like how your introduction to TTRPG. I don't know what would have been my first, but I certainly remember as a kid getting White Dwarf fairly regularly. I don't know if it would have been a monthly magazine, I assume, or quarterly or something like that. I feel like I got it for a little while. I got it fairly regularly. Never bought anything from it. Never used it to buy minis or anything like that. I think I liked the artwork. I think I liked. Yeah. Couldn't tell you anything I read in it. I just remember looking at it and going, "Oh, that's a good looking miniature. I like that. I like whatever they were highlighting." But yeah, I couldn't tell you what else I got it for. Was very much above me, I think, at that point. I was relatively nerdy as a kid, but I think White Dwarf was very much beyond me in terms of my nerdy capabilities and my understanding of this world that we now enjoy so much. I think I can't remember if you mentioned it on the show. It was before we started recording, but you said today or this weekend you're going to be playing Warhammer with Theo. Theo being your son, for anyone who doesn't know.
We've been so we got the Warhammer 40,000 kind of core set at Christmas time. So we've both been painting. We've got all kinds of minis and what have you. So we've been feeling our way through the game. Really, it's a very, very complex game. Every unit, every miniature, every character's got its own set of rules. And at the moment, we're playing a very watered down version where we're playing on a much smaller scale than it should be played. Just try to get to grips with the mechanics of combat and movement and that kind of thing. But we had a game yesterday and he destroyed me. So we're upping the ante a bit today, and we're putting some more minis on the table, and we're going to have another game this afternoon. It's nice that it's cerebral. It's something to play with him that's away from a screen for a couple of hours. It encourages him to want to paint the minis and stuff as well. So it's trying to do things that we can both enjoy, that I'm going to enjoy doing with him, that he's going to enjoy doing. He's probably on the young side to be playing it. It's a lot of it's quite complex, but it's something for us to do together.
And is he enjoying it? Is it something that he wants to do, or do you don't feel like you're forcing him to do it or anything like that? Is it something he actively asks to do or anything?
Oh yeah, he much like us. As soon as we started playing D&D and what have you, he wants to play D&D. As soon as I started painting some minis, he wants to paint minis. He likes the idea of it all. He wants to be involved in it. When he draws Space Marines, or he draws D&D classes and that kind of stuff. He wants to be involved in it. He's very much interested in doing it. Another mutual friend of ours, we've spoken about getting the kids involved in a watered down D&D game at some point as well. He does want to. Ultimately at this point, I'm just trying to do anything with him to get him away from a tablet and a TV screen though.
Yeah,
but
we're my daughter's at an age where she's very much living on the tablet, and I don't like it particularly, but at the same time she's sort of an age where it's quite difficult to really connect with her. Like playing games, she doesn't really understand the point of what a game is and stuff like that, whereas obviously Theo's a little bit older and you can sort of have that proper like sit down, actually try and get him involved in something, whatever it may be. But it's good to know. I mean, on that point, and obviously the fact you being a teacher and obviously have interactions with obviously kids on a larger scale, I think you've mentioned this in conversations with other people, but do you think that like RPGs and things like that have a place? Maybe not in the school setting, I'm certainly not curriculum, but in terms of school clubs and things like that, do you think it's something that they should be maybe not encouraged to do, because that sounds like it's more important than certain other things, but do you think it's something that should be seen in schools as sort of social clubs and things like that? Would you encourage it at yours?
100%. Once things are back to normal and I'm able to do things like that, it's difficult for me because as a music teacher I have extracurricular activities that I'm expected to do and that I want to do that are musical, but I do want to try and do something with D&D. I think it's really important. I've seen kids at every school I've gone to, groups of kids that will sit and play Pokemon or play Yu-Gi-Oh, those kind of games, and I just think to myself, those are the same kids that ultimately that would probably enjoy playing D&D. Kids that like games, kids that want to do something that's sociable, because there is even in those collectible card games, whilst it's not kind of pure role play, there is still an element of putting yourself in the position of the Pokemon trainer or the whatever a Yu-Gi-Oh player is called or whatever, So I think there are still kids that would enjoy that social, traditional role-playing game. I think it's really good to give a certain type of kid a group, to give them a safe space, to give them an opportunity to turn off reality for a bit. That's what it was for me. It was somewhere to go at lunchtime where there were other like-minded kids. There was no one who was going to bully you or call you a name for being nerdy or liking things that they didn't like, and it was just a safe space. And I think that it's, in terms of imagination, in terms of the way it switches your brain on a little bit more. It does have, it's not only a social thing, it is good for kids' development.
Yeah, I think that from just an outsider point of view, and certainly for myself, there's things that can be learned. It's reasoning, it's problem solving, it's I think role playing and acting and things like that also help us to sort of try and maybe think about our own place in society as well as others. I think role playing and it helps probably with empathy of identifying with other people and other types of things. Maths, it helps to some degree with that, with having to work around modifiers and all that sort of stuff. So I think there's plenty of different little things that it would work with. Certainly, like I say, I don't work in the school, but but equally I sort of look at it and go, I can see why this would be beneficial to some kids. Not everyone's going to get it. Not everyone's going to want to love it, and it might not necessarily call to everyone. But I think ultimately there are definitely things that can be learnt from it, and I'm sort of an advocate. And so I do think it'd be nice to see more of that. And you saying there about the kids that are playing, say, Pokemon. I was listening to a podcast a few months ago, Chaotic Creations, and they had a guy on there who runs and has developed his own Pokemon themed game.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even have to be Dungeons and Dragons necessarily. No. Like if there was a big like Pokemon group, and they thought about wanting to get involved in it, they don't have to completely jump ship to a new thing. They could essentially mesh the two and take that passion they already have for something and adapt it into something else. Obviously, for you and whoever, I don't know how you would organise these sort of clubs in schools, in school, but whether you were actually running it or whether you were just overseeing it and just letting them learn the thing themselves. It's clear that there's something in this RPG for everyone, and I think that's going to help adults and kids.
Yeah.
With RPG, let's just touch on D&D specifically. We're going to talk. The whole reason I want to get people on here is to talk about DMing. But just before we go on that, on D&D, you've obviously now been playing for how long is it? When's it you joined? You joined about April, our game.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. How did you find that coming back into the world of D&D, having not played for years? And obviously you had a relatively safe space in terms of knowing everyone that was involved, but how did you find coming back into it as an older man, so to speak, having not had the experience for years?
It's good. I mean, the internet, it makes such a massive difference, doesn't it? Like, instantly I was able to find all kinds of sources, all kinds of websites, like RPG Bot. Websites like that, which allow you to, when you first start playing, and you're like, all right, I want to make a character. What is the absolute best way I can make this character work in terms of being the best for winning Dungeons and Dragons? So there's resources like that which are fantastic, which really help you. But ultimately, I think that 5e as a system just really makes sense. Like it just makes sense. And I think that, like I said, we'll talk about DMing in a bit more in a bit, but you take as little or as much as you want of the mechanics and of the rules, and you build on it. And as long as everyone's having fun playing the game, it doesn't really matter whether you're rules heavy or you're rules light. I think we're the Dice and Design podcast. We're fairly rules light, aren't we? You let things. You let things slide. You'll look things up sometimes, but ultimately you'll make a decision based on whether you think it's fitting for the game. And 5e for me it just kind of makes sense. It allows you pure role playing, basic combat system. You roll some dice. I like the six key stats all make sense. Your modifiers and everything. It just, for me, it all just seemed to make total sense. Like, like older versions and stuff where you'd have like the to hit armor class as hero and that kind of stuff. This system, for me, just makes a lot more sense. Did you find coming into, so we'd obviously played, had we only played the one session when you joined, or were you playing two? I know you. I think you played two. I think you played one in real life and then you'd played one online. No, or maybe not. No, I think you joined. I don't remember doing one online without you, so I must have only done the one session. Did you find like? Because obviously that's something completely new. That's very much like today is new. I've never spoken to you like this one-on-one about you and your experience and stuff. But that was something else new that we'd never done before, like role playing or acting, or Did you find any embarrassment? Did you find it hard adapting to that with new people? I know we knew each other, but new people that you'd never done that before with. Did you find that awkward or embarrassing? Or I don't think so. I think there was an element of joining a party one session in, where there were certain things, there were certain in-jokes that had already developed that I didn't feel part of. There was, for example, I think there was a javelin that had been inserted in a horse's anus, which that everyone was like all over, and I was like, I don't know that. But it only took a session or so for me to feel completely part of it. I think by that point as well, we might have brought another player in as well.
Yeah, I think we played once with you, and then I think the second session, or the third, your second session, I think we might have brought Mike in. I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was either one or two between you and him coming on board.
Yeah.
Um,
and that instantly, then I wasn't the new guy anymore. So
no. And like you said, I think even the in-jokes that we did have, we didn't have many. We'd played. I can't remember, the first session was probably about 4 hours long. Obviously quite chunky. But nothing too mad. I don't think there was too many in-jokes off the back of that. But you coming in second session, from there on in, everything else just everything there on after is going to be an in-joke to you. I'm so glad that we got you on board. Like if COVID had never happened and we'd carried on playing D&D face to face, there's a good chance we wouldn't have got you involved, because I'm not sure that we would have developed to an online game. I think we would have stuck, me, Luke, MJ and Sam would have probably just played in person once a month, or however long it would have taken us to meet up, because we're not exactly all on top of each other physically. But there's a chance that you wouldn't have come on board, and I'm so glad you did, because I think you add so much to the podcast, both, the music side of things. I mean, we'll talk about, we didn't mention it in the music thing, but this is Bardcore, and Dweezil Van Zephyr's songs in the podcast, I think, just give us so much more legitimacy as a show. But I think you as a person, I think you're one of the guys in the group who drives the story forward. Yeah, you want to have fun. Yeah, you want to enjoy yourself and make jokes, etc., etc. But I think you're also very much, we're here to tell a story, and you help push that forward. Not saying other people don't, but just you always have that at the back of your mind that, yeah, it's all well and good having fun, but I don't want to be here every 2 weeks just staying in the same spot, just doing dick jokes. Like, it's nice to evolve the story and evolve the game further. Is that true? Would you say that's fair?
I think so. I think you need to have a mixture. What I love about our crew is that we have got a mixture of people who are really invested in storytelling and really enjoy and get completely immersed in it. And then we've got complete chaos. We've got people that want their characters to be special, and we've got people who are happy to be in the background. And I think you absolutely need that. And I take the game a little bit more seriously. I want my characters to have more of a serious side to them, and I want to see where they're going to go. So you want to push the story on to get there. I don't want to still be in a cave at level 3 in 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. And
stroking rats.
And neither do I. I tell you what, that's hard. Always remembering where we are on the podcast and where you and I are. Like you said about the stroking the rat thing happened at this point months ago. Yeah. We did a podcast earlier this week, and we started making in-jokes about stuff that happened in the last session to somebody who listens to the podcast, and it was just very odd that we're going, oh shit, yeah, she doesn't know what we're talking about, because I think it was about Catamon Piggins, which again, people who listen to this will not know who Catamon Piggins is, unless they follow us on Twitter. But yeah, it's just funny. But no, I thank you for that, and I would guess that's probably for me as well. That's what I would want. Yeah, the chaos is quite hard to deal with at times, but ultimately that is the that's what I want to be doing with my time. I want there to be fun. I don't want it to be just 6 of us just all story driven and being quite serious and just trying to do that. I mean, yes, it would get the story moving quicker, but ultimately it might be at the sacrifice of a bit of fun. But it's nice having that bit of chaos, just to have a bit of downtime and just enjoy the moment and be a bit silly and a bit stupid. And hopefully listeners resonate with that, and hopefully people who listen to our show like that mixture. I think we fortunately do straddle both of them fairly well. I don't think we've had 1 or 2 occasions where maybe the chaos has got the better of us. But yep. We're on monitoring that on with every session, and hoping that doesn't become too much of an issue, because we want people to be invested in the story and the characters. So yeah, but like I say, I'm so glad that we got you involved, because like I say, I just think you add so much to the podcast. Not to say no one else does, but it was when you just get someone and you're like, that feels right. Do you have, just a really silly question, do you have any favourite classes or creatures or anything from the game, like specifically that you, in the near year that you've been playing, that you've enjoyed either playing as or playing against?
Do you know what I love? Just low level antagonists. I think goblins are just tremendous fun. There's a reason why they're so overused in D&D and RPG systems. When you first start playing, you're like, yeah, just kill the goblins, and then you start reading things online and on Twitter and stuff, and it's like, why is everyone just, that goblin was someone's son, that goblin was someone. I have had some of these kind of crisis of morality about whether or not we should just be going around, because we are a little bit murder hobo-y. I've had a really small well of classes that I've played. I played a sorcerer, which I'd like to go back to a caster at some point again. I had a bit of a disaster with a sorcerer in a one shot. I was enjoying playing a monk in Path, and that was in D&D, wasn't it? When I was playing Elro, it was in D&D. Enjoyed playing a monk. Bard, I've played a rogue, which I very much enjoyed. I'd like to go back. I'd like to specifically revisit that exact character again. Another point, because I felt like that was cut short for me. But do you know what? Bard just makes complete sense to me. I feel really, really comfortable playing it. Like when I first decided to play a Bard, and was like, it's a great idea. Yeah, play a Bard. It makes sense for you. It's like, it really, really does. I think it's unlikely that I will. Should anything ever happen to Dweezil, will I ever play a Bard again? Maybe not. Like, there are characters that you play which will end up defining you. You play them for a long time, and what it would feel kind of weird to make another Bard and try and make it different to Dweezil. You can go down different colleges and that kind of stuff, but ultimately the way I play Dweezil as a Bard, Dweezil's not a horny Bard stereotype, which I'm very proud to say. I think Dweezil actually meets many Bard stereotypes. He's a much more he's got a lot more self-doubt than most bards will have, and I think it'd be difficult for me to then just go and play a different type of bard. The class that's really surprised me that I'm enjoying though is I'm playing a fighter in Pathfinder, because I didn't have time to plan a more interesting character, and I'm just loving playing a big daft lad with a sword. It's totally. It's refreshing to not have to think when you're RPing a bard and you've got to face up the party and you've got to have a conversation with someone, and you've set this bar for someone who tries to tie people in knots with words and this, that, and the other. It's quite stressful sometimes. Like there's times where I'll purposefully not say anything because I'm just not feeling particularly RP, not feeling particularly confident in it myself. Whereas I reckon I've always got it in me to swing a sword at a goblin.
And if you haven't, you're playing the wrong games, to be honest. I totally get that. I think that's the same. Not that we got too many sessions of it, but it'd be the same with me playing a paladin.
Yeah.
Like, we only got like half a dozen sessions, but I don't feel like I could ever play a paladin certainly not in D&D, maybe in a different game if there was but certainly in D&D I don't feel like I could play another paladin without wanting to be Tarhan. It just felt right to me. Although the character was semi-developing as we were playing, he sort of started off trying to be quite serious, ended up being a bit of a joke, bit of a whatever. But I just don't think that I would ever go down that route unless I just resurrected him as a character. And I could see the same for you, like, especially as obviously you've so far, and hopefully do go on to play as a bard for quite some time. By the time you finish your story, whether that's a tragic end or whether that's the end of SKT, I don't see what you could do. Because to me, Dweezil is very much you. He is an extension of your personality. He is you, but slightly exaggerated. And yeah, you'd have to literally, if you wanted to play a bard, you'd have to do something completely different and just play Katamon. You'd have to play something completely just unlike you whatsoever. And I don't know if that necessarily is what you want to do. Luke on our show often talks about role-playing characters that you feel comfortable with and that you don't have to think about too much. Whereas when you're playing something that's completely different to you, every single line that comes out of your mouth or every single action you've got to do, you have to think about, is that what that person would do? And that works for some people, and it doesn't necessarily work for others. So,
yeah,
right. Let's talk about DMing then. That's why I got you on here, and that's what I'm aiming to sort of. Although we've spent nearly an hour talking about everything, but yeah, dungeon mastering. You've obviously not got a huge. It's fair to say you've not got a huge experience with it. You've done, what have you done now? About 4 or 5 sessions, I think, with us.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So what have you done? Yeah. We did 3 sessions of the
three sessions of the boat party.
Yeah, the boat party.
And then the Christmas one shot, and I think that's it.
Another one. Oh,
might have done 4, might have been 4 sessions, 3 or 4 sessions of the boat party, and then the Christmas one shot that I DM'd. Yeah.
So I think the first question is, when you first started playing last year, did you see DMing being in your future? Is it something that when you started playing, or even just shortly after you started playing, did you think, I wouldn't mind giving DMing a go, or did you sort of feel, no, that's not for me, don't want to touch that at all?
I think it felt inevitable. As soon as I started playing, you start thinking about, like, the idea of doing something at school and what have you did come into my head almost immediately. So you're thinking, I'll probably end up DMing. That it did seem almost inevitable that I'll end up DMing, because the more, particularly right at the beginning as well, where I was just constantly reading D&D stuff, you're like, I'm putting all this work in. At some point, it'd be nice to be in control of it. But then, after a while of playing, I realised I did not want to DM. I didn't want to at all, and you kept you'd be a great DM, Stuart. I think you'd be a fantastic DM. I think you're a really good storyteller. You're really creative. You'll be a great DM. And I was like, oh, thanks, mate, but I'm not doing it.
Well, that was obviously I've got a vested interest in that as someone who likes, who does enjoy his role as it is. It's nice to play every now and again, and obviously I've always got that vested interest. If someone wants to DM, cool, that gives me a night off. But equally, I stand by it. Before and after I've seen you DM, as a musician, even if you don't, create your own music. Music is a story in its own way, even without singing. And so, you've got that. You are that. You're very good at talking. You're very good at storytelling. Stuff from your own experiences. And so I just always thought Stuart would make a good DM. Like, aside from any nerves or anything like that, any self-doubt, the guy's got it. The guy knows what to do. It's just unlocking that in him. So I'd stand by that then, and even more so now. I think when I first agreed to DM, it was because one of our regular group couldn't play on the night that we were scheduled to play. So I suggested, let's do something else. And it was purely 100% altruistically to give you an opportunity to play rather than DM. So I was like, right, I'll do it. And we'd been contacted by someone who'd asked us if we'd run through one of their one-shots as well. Short campaign. So I'll have a go. I'll have a go at a pre-written module. And, like, it was so incredibly stressful. It was like the prepping for it, doing I'd put things off until the last minute. And then eventually I'd get like a little burst of energy where I'd finally get some stuff done and get something prepped and make my notes and put things in. I felt like I was revising for an exam. I really did feel like I was revising for an exam.
partly because that first adventure, and I don't want to spoil anything because it is recorded and it'll probably come out on the Dyson Desire feed at some point, was a murder mystery, and it was very dense, and I was worried that if I got a small thing wrong, it would have a big impact, because essentially I was drip feeding clues. It was almost entirely RP. There was one combat. Spoilers, brilliant. Beat that out, Nathan.
Nope.
It was almost entirely RP, and I had quite a big cast of NPCs to play, and I, for some reason, committed to distinct accents and voices for every single NPC, which didn't always come out quite as smoothly as I would have liked them to. But I think it was a great module. Really enjoyed it, and I would have loved to have played it, but I found the whole DMing of it incredibly stressful. There were very few points in it where I felt like I could relax and just help you guys to play the game. Whereas my only other experience, we played a Christmas one shot, much more linear. It was if I didn't do something right, it didn't really make much of an impact down the road, because whatever happened, you were getting to where you needed to go. And I really enjoyed it. I didn't have any nerves. I absolutely loved it. And it was, I think, everyone enjoyed the session. It was good fun. But two completely contrasting DMing experiences. And I think what it has shown me is, I think I would be much more comfortable DMing where I was more in control. So I think that there's been some talk that we're possibly going to carry on that one shot into a campaign, and that is going to be homebrew.
Yeah, which I mean, I've now found out it was relatively homebrew anyway, wasn't it? What you I mean, to some degree, what you played with us. I'm not saying completely, but like there was a bit more. You put some of that stuff into it.
Oh yeah, but because I was just mucking around.
Yeah.
Because I had the freedom to do it. And God, this is going to make me sound like a big head. There's a meme, and it's a picture, and it's about being a DM, and it's to do with IQ, and it's like there's a spot in the middle where it's like 90% preparation and hard work. And then you've got below that where it's the not very clever DMs who are just winging it and making it up as they go along. And then above that where you've got the high intelligence DMs who are just winging it up and making it up as they go along. I'm not saying which side of that IQ curve I'm on. I'll leave that for other people to decide. But I think I'm very much a winging it kind of DM. Yeah. And I couldn't do that in the murder mystery because things had to happen in order to progress the story.
Do you think if we played the games the other way around, so if the Christmas one had been your first game, do you think that would have helped with the other one? Take some of the nerves 100%. Out maybe, or
100%. It would have taken some of the nerves out. It would have meant I wouldn't have gone into it feeling God. I mean, we had conversations. Sometimes we'd finish those sessions on the murder mystery, and we'd have half an hour afterwards where I'd just be going, oh, that was awful, and you'd be going, oh no, it was really good. Like everyone's really enjoyed the sessions, and I'm thinking, oh no, it was terrible. You spent 4 hours trying to look in a guy's briefcase. That's not part of the story. I'm thinking, this is on me. I've done something here to make you think that this briefcase it's the ring. That is it. That's the one true ring, and that's what you've got to chase. And it was just absolutely a red herring, And I'm going, well, that must be on me. It must be on something, how I've portrayed this NPC, how I've... and then it's quicksand, when you feel like it's not going well, you struggle more and you get deeper and deeper. And ultimately, everyone said they enjoyed playing it. Everyone enjoyed the characters that they played, because people played silly characters. People did some... I think it was good for us as a group, because it allowed us to. I think we got a lot more RP experience doing that than we'd had in our campaign up to that point. It allowed people to play completely out of their comfort zone. I mean, I remember a certain Nathan Peterson getting very, very drunk at a party and That was fun.
It's funny, like you say that. I don't want to give too much away about the story, but it's funny you say that because like, so I created a character who was I can't remember if she was an elf or a half elf druid, and she was like supposed to be only like 16 or something like that, very young, had literally just. Well, when I created the character, obviously the sort of backstory to the game that we played ultimately didn't really work with it. But ultimately, the character I created, she'd just come out into the world. She'd lived a very sheltered world, and essentially she just wanted to learn about the world because she needed to report back to her family and stuff like that. So she was supposed to be very inquisitive, quite serious. A lot would go over her head because she wouldn't understand references or wouldn't understand stuff. And that was the character I devised. But sometimes you've got to roll with the punches. Sometimes the character you build doesn't work with the story, and you've just got to go with it. And okay, it was just a short campaign, so it's not like it was on a long campaign. But ultimately, then it worked out that the story would work well if she just happened to get very drunk very quickly. And it was quite funny to play. It was very funny to play. It was a couple of hours where she was just a drunk teenager on a ship.
Yeah.
And it sort of worked for the story. But it was also just, as you know, being a player, you sort of, there's times where you do want to have fun. Like we said earlier about, there's driving the story forward, but equally you do need times where you just want to decompress and just have fun in the moment that you're in, because you don't want to just be racing through. Yeah, that's a short campaign, and to some degree you are trying to race through it. But it was very fun. And like I say, now that we've talked about that campaign in particular, I think you did a great job. I think you did a stellar job. I do think, in hindsight, it's very difficult. We got offered this module, and obviously I can't read it beforehand to see whether I think it's something that a new DM should take, because obviously that would give me stuff that, as a player, I would know and whatever. So I just threw it at Stuart and went, there you go, do this. And I think you're right. I think realistically, someone for their first DM session, unless it really fits into their wheelhouse of wanting to have complete. The whole story just be told to them and them just being a conduit for it, and for it to be so detail heavy, I think it's always going to be quite an intimidating story to tell. I think you did it fantastically. I think it's all great that we looked after. We went for the suitcase, because we're not watching Poirot or something like this. Ultimately there are going to be red herrings. There are going to be things that we get infatuated with which have nothing to do with the story. The problem was we had that, and we didn't actually know where we should be going. It's not like we did that and it brought us back on track. We just sort of needed Stuart to basically tell us the entire thing as we were going. But no, in terms of the DMing, I think you did a fantastic show. You could see how much more comfortable we were. Even second session of that, even though it was the same story, even second session you felt more comfortable with it, and third, equally. So, and then when we got to the Christmas one, I think you did a tremendous job. What we sort of touched on it, or I sort of threw it at you and you mentioned it. What strengths do you think then you do and would bring as a DM? What is it just the bullshitting part of it, if you will, that you think is what your strongest point would be as a DM?
Ultimately, at this stage, I've DM'd sessions without actually understanding how the mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons work very well. So, the fact that I've got that kind of that confidence to just absolute BS through it has enabled me to do it. I do want to. I am keeping a lookout for the source books for a reasonable price. I'm totally off topic, but the price that second-hand DM's guides and players' handbooks go for on eBay is ridiculous. They go for the same price as you can. I want to pay £20 for a second-hand book. That's what I want, but no one's willing to sell them to me for that amount. I think as well that what I'm not, and what I have never been in any of the sessions, and I don't think it is, I would never be a combative DM. I would never be a DM who is against the players. Ultimately, I want the players to do well. I want the story to progress. I think that I would have to learn, as I think you've had to learn, that sometimes you've got to be cruel to be kind, though, and you've got to there has to be peril. Otherwise, what is the point? Like, I think that because I've come at it from a player's point of view, and I think about the players, what I want is I want my players to feel like heroes. Mm-hmm. So one thing that I think that I was proud of at the time was in the Christmas one shot. One of our players, anyone who's listening to this will know him. It's Will from Roll the Damn Dice was playing in that one shot, and he was playing a fighter called Simon Says Miss, and his catchphrase was Simon Says Miss, but I never do. And that was his thing for his character. His character never misses. And one thing that I tried to do throughout the entire one shot was make that true. So, for example, he fired an arrow at a snowman that was an adversary. And prior to him firing an arrow at that snowman, our barbarian had taken a swing at the snowman, and when the arrow missed, the arrow didn't miss. It went through the hole that had been knocked out by the barbarian. So little things like that to make. I want my players to feel like heroes. Ultimately, that's why we play the game. We play it because we want to be heroes in a fantasy world, and taking on board what my players want to do and trying to make that true is something that I think would be my hallmark as a fledgling DM, and something that I would want to build my DMing style on.
Yeah, I agree that. We didn't really talk about it too much in the sort of TTRP session of this chat, but there are ways of playing this game. Like you said, you got the rules light, the rules heavy, the RPG, the combat. Any game that you step into is going to be completely different. If I go and play with, taking them as an example, if I go and play with Roll the Damn Dice, it's going to be completely different to anything I've ever experienced. I don't know how Will plays as a DM in terms of how heavy he is on rules, how much of a stickler he is, how much of a combatant he is in terms of like not wanting you to fail, but if you fail, so what? It's all going to be completely different. But I think you're right. Like coming to our game, Dice and Desire, ultimately I want all 5 of you to survive till the very end. I don't want any of you to have to create a new character. I don't want any of you to lose the character that you've fallen in love with. But at the same time, I don't want you to be immortal. Like, if you die, if something comes along that kills you and is good enough to kill you, good. Yeah. That's right, and it's right for the story, then good. I don't want you to get felled by something completely irrelevant, like we've had recently. Krill's been in a bit of peril with some giant rats in a cave. If he died then and there, a little bit anticlimactic, not just in terms of the timing in the story, because we're still early on, but equally our big barbarian got killed by some rats is a bit weak sauce, isn't it? If he's going to die, we want him to die at some mid-level boss, or someone completely powerful who it makes sense for him to die against.
Yeah.
But I don't want him to die. But equally, I want him to, like you said, it's nice, in the last few episodes we've had that are released, there's been some peril for you guys. We've had the Black Blob, which could have quite easily killed you all. Had that gone a different way, could have quite easily killed all of you. As much as I'm joking, the giant rats did do some damage to Krill. Admittedly, that was bad tactics on his part, because he didn't rage, and therefore he was taking more damage than he normally would, because he was overconfident about what he was up against, and that will make him think. And that's the thing, is it's not just about wanting to be heroic, but a bit of character development, both for the characters and the players. Like, he'll now go, if we ever go into another cave and there's a load of giant rats, I can sure as shit tell you he's raging immediately. Yeah. And that's what you, like you say, that's what you want from your DM. You want to tell a good story. You want them to feel heroic. You don't want them to feel like they're just going through the motions. I don't want you guys to kill everything in your path with ease. And we saw that recently. In the last session we did, without spoiling too much, you guys have come up against a foe, and it's fair to say you struggled. Fortunately, without spoiling too much again, it doesn't mean anything in the longer context, but at the same time, it felt like you were like, shit, maybe we're a little bit out of our depths. Maybe we need to think about things. Maybe we need to look at how we approach this in the future. And that's what you want. So I think like you brought all that when we played. So do you think homebrewing, is that something you said about wanting to do, have you started, is that something you've looked at actively to write your own thing?
I haven't started writing anything. I've got an idea. So what I don't feel confident doing, I want long-term stories to come about organically. So what I foresee doing and this is a bit of a spoiler for the campaign that we're going to play, is I want to write a series. I kind of told you guys this. Well, I want to write a series of one-shots, which then get held together by a longer form story that comes out of it. Like I want the long form. I want it to be completely open ended from the first point of view. I've got an idea for what I want the first session to be. I just need to work out the mechanics because it's going to be quite high concept. I want to really push myself on it. But yeah, the idea of being completely in control of it. I like the idea of using it as a creative outlet. That's then got a bit of a downside to it because you've got to wait for some inspiration. So I wouldn't want to be having to create something on demand to a deadline. Another one of our friends who DMs has said that he often will turn up at a session and he doesn't really know what's going to happen because he just hasn't had a chance to prep for it, and he's running homebrew. So he's got a rough idea of what's supposed to happen in the story, but ultimately he ends up winging it a lot, which reminds me of the way we used to play D&D at school, basically. Just completely winging it. I don't want to do that. I want to plan things that are going to be engaging, that are going to be fun. Essentially, I want to create sessions that are gonna really pop the players. That when the players realise what's happening, they're gonna go, "Oh yes!" Because for me, like as a player, you get those moments when something amazing happens in the game, and you get that feeling of, "Yeah, I just did that." I want that as the DM, and I don't want it from nearly killing you with a monster, and you're going, "Oh bloody hell, you nearly had us there, Stuart." I want it from that moment of realisation where you realise what it is that I've done, what it is that I've planned, or the reference or the concept, and you go, bloody hell, that's clever, or oh, that's brilliant, and then you get it, and you get that, and the players then get excited about it, and I want that feeling. So it has to be creative, and it has to be really planned out. So in answer to your question, Nathan, no, I haven't started writing anything.
Fair play though. Like, I do think you like you said earlier, you're fun at, you're good at the bullshitting side of it, and I think you could probably get away with being a bit of a skeleton story, make it up as you go along sort of thing, maybe not to that idea, maybe not quite as simplistic as that, but you could have an idea of where you want to start, where you want to be, and what the key points are in between, and then just feel it out. Especially as I don't know what your plans are, but I would have thought any games that you run, if you're talking about the group that we played at Christmas, they're just for fun. We're not necessarily playing them for the podcast. They're just literally so you don't have that additional pressure of making sure that people who listen to it, because that terrifies me as a DM. Like it's not just making sure that you 5 people enjoy yourself. And carry on, but then also thinking, shit, other people are going to listen to this. Oh my god, I've forgotten the rules. What should I be doing here? Should I be making them roll this? Should I be like? It does definitely add a pressure, which probably didn't help as well with the pleasure boat thing, because obviously I know we don't have an idea when that's going to be released or how, but equally, you would have been like, shit, this is my first time ever DMing, and I'm doing it on a podcast potentially. So. Cool. We are sort of running a little bit longer than I expected, so I think, unless there's anything else you want to talk about on DMing in particular, anything you raised, I want to play a little game with you, but is there anything else on DM that you want to talk about?
No, man. No, let's play a game. Right. Do I need dice?
Sorry?
Do I need dice?
Yeah, just a D6, please. Just one D6 is all I need from you. So yes, we're going to play a very quick game. It's a completely original game. No one's ever played anything like this in the entire history of the world. It's a game called Satyr or Sorcerer. That's a joke, because anybody who's listened to Fruck Unwrapped, our other podcast that Stuart and I appeared on, there was a game on there called Sweeter or Savourer, and this is essentially, which in itself is, relative. Well, it's not play on words, is it? I guess, but Savourer is certainly is. I'm waffling at this point. Anyway, this Satyr or Sorcerer is essentially a play on words of Sweeter or Savourer. what those two words mean in the context of this game, nothing really. They're just two words that sound very similar to sweeter and savourer. The idea of this game is we're going to choose at the outset one of the ability scores, your charisma, wisdom, strength, whatever, and from there on in we're going to do some random monsters, and it's ultimately Stuart having to guess up front before they're rolled whether they are the next monster is going to be higher or lower score. What I will say, and this is something that obviously because we've got the mathematics here that we didn't have on Sweet and Savoury, which is obviously a bit of an opinion. What I'm going to say is, if it meets, it beats, to steal a catchphrase from our friend Luke from the Dyson Dice Show. So if you say higher and the figure is actually the same, then we'll say that's fine and we'll carry on. Okay?
Yeah.
For the purposes of practicalities, I am going to in future have these sort of as a what would you just some slips that I pull out of a hat or something in the future. At the moment, because I'm very unorganised, all I've done is I've grabbed the monster manual and I'm just literally going to be flipping pages and picking a random monster at that point. So first off, can you please roll me a d6, please, to determine what stat we are building this on?
That is a 1.
So that is strength. Okay. So
if I'd had to choose one, I think I'd have chosen strength.
Fair play. And what would be your least favourite choice? What would be your bottom choice?
I don't know. Maybe con, because I genuinely like. It's kind of not. It's the least used stat for a lot of things, and I don't really have any understanding of what anything's con would be really. Whereas strength, you kind of know. Like if you go, it's a goblin, it's strength 7. You go, I understand that. Strength's pretty easy to get.
Maybe intelligence second.
Yeah.
Right. Your first monster then. We are starting with it's a deep gnome.
Isn't it?
Its strength is a 15. So you think the next monster is going to be higher or lower than a 15?
It's a strong little gnome, isn't it? I'm going to go lower than a deep gnome.
Lower than a deep gnome. I mean, they're pretty low as it is because they're deep and gnomes. Air elemental. 14. Just.
There we go.
Just. Are we going higher or lower than 14?
Let's go lower than a 14.
What a man. He lands on exactly the same page, so we won't do that. And that also is not a page with any stats on it. Right, Shadow Demon.
Oh.
1.
Really?
A strength of 1.
Wow.
I wonder where you're going to go with this one.
Let's go higher than a 1, please.
Yeah, it's probably going to be higher than a 1, isn't it? This is, good God, how do I pronounce this? Kuatoa Archpriest 16. It's a strong priest.
Ooh. He's a very strong priest, isn't he? Bloody hell! Back to religion again. It's come full circle. He couldn't have planned that better. Let's go lower than a priest.
Was your mate's dad quite strong?
You have to
lower than a 16, you say?
Yeah.
I'm afraid you've got young silver dragon. 23.
Oh.
Whopping 23. A +6 modifier. All right. Well, I'm going to play by slightly different rules, which is I'm not going to count the first one, which you used to play on Sweetener and Savoury.
Oh.
There's no reason that everyone should start with 1, Stuart. Like, so the context of the game over there, if you get your first one wrong, you still end the game with 2 points. I don't understand the logic there. So that was 3 in total, I think, then. So we went, higher, low, yep.
Yeah,
so that's 3 points.
Then the elemental, so 1 for the elemental, then the demon, then the priest, 3, yeah.
Yeah, so 3.
Yeah, that's all right.
So it's a start.
It's a good start.
We've got the bar set, and we'll just see whether the next person can leap on over it.
There we go.
Hopefully not. Hopefully that's the best score we ever get in that game, because it was tremendous. So that was Satyr or Sorcerer. Will that game stick around? We'll see. Maybe I'll develop a new game. Who knows? Thank you very much, Stuart, for joining me on my very first episode of DM and DMer. Obviously wanted to get someone on that I was familiar with so that I could test this out, run this as a pilot, see if it works. I think it worked fairly well. It's nice to talk to you. I mean, if nothing else, it's nice to talk to you.
Correct.
Good friend of mine, and it's nice to talk to you about things that we don't ordinarily talk about, like your music and how much religion you consume. Is there anything you wish to plug? I'm sure you've got loads of things you'd like to plug.
I'd like to plug my YouTube channel, Nathan, which is it's YouTube Dweezil Vanzafir, which with hindsight I should have probably gone for This Is Bardcore as the YouTube channel as well, because it's much easier to remember. Dweezil Vanzafir on YouTube. I am This Is Bardcore everywhere else. So on Twitter, This Is Bardcore, and TikTok, This Is Bardcore. Although realistically, I'm not sure how much effort I'm putting into TikTok. And I am also now available on Spotify. The artist name is This Is Bardcore. All one word. All one word.
And I was listening to that last night as I was doing some final D&D prep for Monday's session. And whilst I'm a big fan of the stuff he's released on YouTube, I don't know, there was something about listening to it on Spotify sort of in the background. The thing I don't like about listening to music and stuff on YouTube is you can't, you have to be in YouTube to listen to it first and foremost. You can't just shut it down. Like with Spotify, you can sort of go off and play with other apps and stuff like that. YouTube, as soon as you leave YouTube, it's gone. So I hate that. Also, I feel a pressure to watch it. Yeah. Even though there's nothing more often than not, apart from the lyrics, there's not necessarily anything on screen, I feel the pressure to watch it. Whereas this was nice, it was on, I was pissing about on the laptop and it was on in the background, and I'll be honest, I found it so much better to listen to on there. So if you haven't listened to the volume 1, and it was also nice to have it all as a compact little playlist, rather than going from one to one, one song to the next. So I really liked to listen to it on Spotify. So what I'm saying is, if you found Dweezil Vanzafir shit on YouTube, try it on Spotify and you might like it. No, that's a joke. Clearly a joke, because it's all tremendous. The man puts a lot of work into it. I think they're absolutely tremendous. He doesn't get he doesn't get the accolades that he deserves for the amount of work that he puts into it. Please do go and check them out. Great reworkings of modern songs. Anything else? I mean, do you want to plug Fruck Unwrapped or Dice and Desire? I mean, people will know.
I felt as soon as I finished plugging things, I thought I should probably should have plugged Dice and Desire. But ultimately, like you said, this is on the Dice. This will be on the Dice and Desire feed. So just listen to the podcast just above it in your downloads. If you've never listened to Fruck Unwrapped, give it a go. Fruck, F-R-U-K, Unwrapped, all one word. Depending on when Nathan edits this podcast and puts this one out, depends on how many episodes you've got left of it. Yeah,
we are coming to an end on that run, but we've done well with that. It's nearly 4 years in the making. But yeah, do please listen to that. And obviously, if you've never listened to it, obviously you've got 4 years worth of podcasts to listen to.
Correct.
Hooray you! Thank you very much, Stuart. I hope you've had a good time. And I guess I'll speak to you on Monday.
Yeah.
And before then, probably.
Probably. Every day. Constantly.
Every day. It's funny, isn't it? How often people talk to each other every single day.
I speak to you more than I speak to my wife.
That's the point. I'm never catching up with you. Do you know what I mean? There's people I don't speak to for weeks, months on end, and I'm like, so what's been going on in your life? I just... Anything happened since 10 o'clock last night? No, probably not. Lovely stuff. All right, thank you very much, Stuart.
Thanks, Nathan.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button on your favourite podcast app to ensure you don't miss any future instalments of Dice and Desire. And in the meantime, if you want to interact with us, come and find us on Twitter and Instagram @Dice and Desire.